Our talk is called Processing the Pandemic, and we thought, that our society seemed to want to forget the pandemic, and that very few TV shows or movies even portrayed the world during it. And we're wondering, is it over? And if so, for whom? Because we're still getting about a 9/11 worth of death every 2 weeks in the US. And is that simply the new normal? Or is that because we undervalue who is mostly dying now? The elderly, the chronically ill, and the disabled. And we wonder if death is the only COVID consequence we need to consider. So literature is one way to process our grief and fear and anger and isolation and the tremendous cost of what happened. We're going to each read work about what and whom we lost and what we felt during the pandemic. And those of us in this group who are left behind, those people with immunocompromised or multiple morbidities or advanced age or disabilities, or who are sharing a home with these conditions, feel like we're still COVIDing. So we'd like to tell listeners what it's like to be excluded from public life and maybe even afraid to get medical, dental, and visual care in offices where protections have been stripped. Our participants are me, Jan Steckel, and I'm also acting as moderator, Amaranthia, Sepia, and Claire Jones, who are daughter and mother, Suchandrima Banerjee, and Tierney. So Amaranthia Sepia is a Black, invisibly disabled creative activist. Amaranthia, along with her mom, Claire, co-founded Sista Creatives Rising. She's a cohort member of Socially Distant Art, a residency focusing on disabled creatives. Returning to America after spending her childhood in Japan, Sepia was severely bullied. Creating works based on fond memories of Tokyo taught her the healing power of art. Since 13, she's coordinated art events on anti-bullying advocacy, BLM, disability, and women's mental health. She provides artists tools for utilizing their creativity to gain confidence to make a difference in their communities. Please welcome Amaranthia Sepia.
Yeah, thank you so much for the intro, Jan. So I will start my story. First off, as part of our work for Sista Creatives Rising, my mom and I advocate for virtual and hybrid spaces for disabled, chronically ill, immunocompromised people, along with people who aren't disabled but want to stay safe. We are disabled and immunocompromised ourselves, and as a result, we are still masking and still COVIDing. With mask mandates fading, especially in healthcare, many of us are still restricted to our homes. And since Black people are disproportionately affected by COVID, we gather stories by Black people to raise awareness. The slideshow containing these stories is titled Black and Still COVIDing, Stories of Separation, Isolation, Disability, and Hope. I'll share our story from the slideshow, then my mom will share a few of the submitted stories. And you can also read them at sistacreativesrising.com. So my mom and I are disabled and I'm on SSI. We were told about an opportunity for a fellowship that offers $10K to finalists. They claim that they are ADA compliant and will make accommodations as necessary for any disabled folk. I was told in 2021, due to COVID, I can apply and not have to go to their in-person events if I became a finalist. At the time, it was about 90% virtual over the course of 12 months. And I was also told in 2021 that a 100% virtual program will open in 2022/2023. I wasn't accepted, but I decided that my mom should apply later on. My mom was diagnosed with cancer in 2022, lost her mobility, and had to fight to gain it back while avoiding COVID. Thankfully, she didn't catch it. She was tested and she was checked by the hospital's infectious disease unit several times because we all take serious precautions and everyone around us wore masks. This program was a major motivator for her while receiving treatment because it would help her fund her creative endeavors remotely while she recovered and learned how to walk again. We contacted this fellowship in the fall after she came into remission, and we were told that the fellowship can accommodate her and she wouldn't have to go to their in-person events, which last a few days. This was also the case for an Ivy League certified course I was interested in taking that was developed by the same organization. This would give me an opportunity to gain more experience in arts leadership while giving me a certificate. As a disabled person who couldn't attend college due to my disability and lack of funds, this was a way to accelerate my career. I reached out again in March when applications opened. Suddenly, the site said that people are required to attend in person, even if they're disabled. I asked them, why was this the case? Because this is not what we were told. After avoiding answering my question for 2 weeks when they're usually extremely responsive team, They responded by saying they would accommodate my mom, but she would have to attend in person. However, she would have to bring her own HEPA filter, and they cannot require masking, while reiterating that they are ADA compliant. My mom has 3 comorbidities, was recently labeled immunocompromised by her pulmonologist, and has mobility issues and neuropathy caused by cancer. She's in a 2-year window where she must be checked every few months in case the cancer comes back. At this time, it's best for her to stay home as much as possible. Why does she have to come to the event when the majority of the fellowship is online and has proven that they're capable of adjusting for disabled folk, which they did at the beginning of the pandemic? The fellowship is now 75% virtual. No masking policy is in place. I believe they state they're not responsible if you get sick. They said it won't be 100% virtual until 2025. I mentioned that they made this accommodation before in 2021 and that they plan to make it virtual for 2022/2023. They answered again and said making it virtual was too difficult, so they're just not doing it. We've had a number of paid opportunities and networking opportunities lost because of the lack of COVID precautions and lack of accessibility in general. Time and time again, it occurs with organizations that claim that they are ADA compliant or care about disability issues, but they don't consult with disabled folks about our needs. When this happens, it directly affects our ability to build our careers and gain income. I cannot apply for the Ivy League course they offer either. Now they require you to attend in person, just like the fellowship, although they made virtual accommodations for disabled folks and for this course once before. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Amaranthia. I have a question for you. Since gathering these stories and finding community, how have you self-advocated and how did these stories inspire you to do so?
Well, once those, the COVID precautions, sorry about that. So once the COVID rules were pulled back by Biden, and we gathered these stories, we got about 23 stories, and we joined different communities who were advocating. We started feeling more inspired and be like, okay, we should self-advocate. And because again of my mom's conditions and my whole family's health issues, we have multiple different health issues that complicate things. We decided to tell our doctors, hey, when you are working around us, please wear N95. It's a two-way street masking because if it's only one person, there's a higher risk of getting sick. So we did that, and we had a nurse that wasn't accommodating us, and it was a really upsetting situation. And so we advocated, we went to patient relations. And as a result of that, they were like, no, the nurse should have done this. This is wrong. They basically were like, this is ableism, and said your mom's situation and your family situation is really difficult. And so anyone should be helping to make sure that you guys are safe. We also have a $6,700 deductible, each of us, with a $13,000 or $14,000 deductible. And we haven't found any other insurance options that are helpful for our family that have good coverage. So if we got COVID, we'd be devastated, any of us. So we just fight hard to get accommodations. And now each person, we know they're at patient relations at different hospitals that we have to go to. And now we take what we've learned and give it back to the community and tell them, well, this is what you can do. And it's been really helpful. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Claire Jones, she, her, is a creative writer, domestic violence survivor, cancer survivor, Buddhist, Francis Perkins scholar, and Mount Holyoke graduate. Goalcast, Best Self Media, and YOPP published her works. In 2023, she presented her talk, A 50% Chance of Paralysis, How I Utilized Journaling During Cancer Treatment, at the Boston Public Library. This served as a precursor to her documentary co-directed by her daughter, Amaranthia, titled A 50% Chance of Paralysis, Get Ahead of Life Before Life Gets Ahead of You. She co-founded Sista Creatives Rising and Art and Mind, a virtual film event showcasing creative marginalized women and marginalized genders. Please welcome Claire Jones.
Hi, thanks, Jan. I'll read 4 stories from our slideshow. We are excited about being able to feature a few of these stories for film and for a virtual workshop we're developing with the Black and still COVID in community. It's still in the works and we hope to feature it early summer 2024. It's titled COVID Accessibility and its Impact on the Black Community. So this story is from VF, who's based in New York City. I originally got COVID-19 bilateral pneumonia in March 2020 in the New York City area. I will never forget the horrors I saw and experienced during that time as my doctors attempted to save my life virtually due to the hospital sending me home. I went to the hospital in March and April of 2020 3 times as my oxygen level plummeted into the 80s. The last ER doctor during that time said, "I wish I could admit you, but there are strict requirements on who to admit, and I may be saving your life by sending you home. I wish you luck." I was given a prescription for medicine and supplemental oxygen. I was never able to obtain the oxygen I needed because the pharmacies were all out. Since then, COVID caused my myocarditis and eventually congestive heart failure. I have had COVID a second time in December of 2022, which has only made my long COVID journey more arduous. I struggle with long COVID symptoms every single day. The damage COVID has caused to my money, my mind and body is lifelong. This is a second story from MH, who's based in New Hampshire. I'm a Black COVID cautious person that is disabled as I'm autistic and I have ADHD. And it has been so alienated as a college student to see so few people taking precautions. I attend Dartmouth, a school that claims to be for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yet, administration has taken away mask requirements, no longer requires documentation saying whether someone got vaccinated and have dorm halls that are inaccessible. The only time I have witnessed a professor take precautions was when I took an intersections class. The professor told the class to come in wearing a mask and explained how wearing one is not only just important for protection, but for disability justice and dismantling ableism. The third story is from JJ, a public health student based in Massachusetts. As a public health student for the past 5 years, I'm aware of how dangerous this pandemic continues to be and how it disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities. I know that the infection control that I'm taught in school does not reflect the actions our society is taking. COVID-19 is a preventable disease that can be mitigated with multi-layered protections, including very well-fitted respirators, implementing HEPA air filtration systems, social distancing, free and accessible PCR testing, and vaccines. The end of the national public health emergency on May 11th also became the end of several of these protections, including the end of universal masking in several healthcare facilities. Unfortunately, due to this, I had to make a difficult decision to resign from my position as the hospital I worked for ended mask requirements. The end of universal masking in healthcare facilities has become inaccessible for several workers and patients. The one place where patients should feel safe has now become one of the most dangerous places to visit. This final story is an excerpt from Lala Shanks, a queer Black disability activist. You can check them out at Audie Shawty, AUTIESHAWTIE. I am COVID cautious because I've been chronically ill for over a decade with a poor immune system and have gotten about 10 infections over the course of the decade. I have had a disease called ME for at least 5 years, the severity of which has intensified since getting COVID in December 2021. Another COVID infection could kill me genuinely. This is the reality of so many people having a worse average quality of life score than cancer patients. This is my reality, and I'm only 22. The lack of virtual events, COVID precautions, and accessibility accommodations in general for in-person events and hybrid options is isolating and often forces vulnerable people to either put themselves at risk or be resourceless in many ways. Virtual community has been life-saving for me. Most of us claim to care about others, So why not invest in that to build sustainable solutions? Unfortunately, around September, Lala and their partner got COVID once again, which destabilized their income for a long period of time. That's it.
Thank you for those powerful stories, Claire. That's going to be a valuable historical record. You're documenting your cancer journey and pandemic experience through your developing memoir, A Gift from Cancer, How to Get Ahead of Life Before Life Gets Ahead of You. And you just showcased your documentary, A 50% Chance of Paralysis, Get Ahead of Life Before Life Gets Ahead of You, at your October Art and Mind event. How has documenting your experience with both film and writing helped you with your healing journey?
Oh, great question. During cancer, I finally landed upon my mission. My mission, my personal mission, is to help marginalized women activate their light in the middle of the chaos by recognizing the causes and effects of intergenerational trauma. And once I came upon this mission, I decided that I was going to go out and share my story. And I was not going to be afraid anymore, because before I had cancer, I suffered from imposter syndrome. And I self-sabotaged a lot. And I decided I wasn't going to do that no more. It was a new day. I decided to use my middle name, Claire, which means bright. And I came out of the hospital, and they told me I had 50% chance of paralysis. But I had 1%, because immediately after coming out of the surgery, I had 1%. I was in the 1% to walk again and begin moving. And I decided to take that 1% and to get ahead of life before life gets ahead of me. And that's my call to action. And over the last 11 months, I came into remission in October last year. And I have just been doing that from October last year to now, working to manifest my vision. And this work that Amaranthia and I are doing are part of that.
Yeah.
It's part of that.
That's miraculous. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Suchandrima Banerjee recently completed her debut literary novel, To Lose an Orange Half, about a woman who travels across the globe at the onset of the pandemic outbreak to confront a trauma from her past life. Her poetry has appeared in the San Pedro River Review and the Redwood Anthology. Suchandrima grew up in the bustling city of Calcutta and came to the U.S. to pursue her PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. A biomedical engineer by profession, she loves to garden, cook, and run on woodsy trails in her spare time. Please welcome Sue Banerjee.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you so much for the introduction. Today, I'm going to read an excerpt from the novel. Let me tell you give you a little bit of the context before reading from it. So this is a novel about the long shadow of trauma and the redeeming power of love, infringed with an undercurrent of dread that was associated with the uncertain early days of the pandemic. The protagonist, Ella Roy, is a biomedical scientist of Indian origin, who associates each shade of emotion with a precise part of her brain. But when her husband, Josh, discusses having a baby, she's gripped with resurging memories of a tragedy that befell the child she babysat as a teenager back in India. All these years, Ella felt safe by distancing herself from associations of the past and by repressing those memories. Now the nagging doubts she harbored about her old boyfriend Tuhin's role in the tragedy return, and she feels compelled to look for answers before she can bring a child to this world. In early 2020, she avails of a business opportunity to travel to the Middle East and India to seek out Tuhin. The two lay eyes on each other on a beach lit only by the phosphorescent waves, and the connection is electric. Ella begins to unravel as she tries to untangle the mystery surrounding the tragedy. Meanwhile, borders close to slow the spread of the raging virus. The part I'm going to read is timed right at this point. The sun lounges indolently along the horizon. Her eyes follow a trail of flotsam in the placid water, while the scenes from the previous evening resurface. Tuhin's eyes, opening wide behind his thick glasses at the other end of the steel tube at the exhibition. The air between about to ionize with the static of the excitement. Tuhin's eyes tearing with grief in the roving strobe light beamed by the lighthouse on the beach. 20 years of avoidance and the recent weeks of restless agony culminated into one operatic evening. She yearned to breathe in his earthy musk mixed with the powdery scent of chalk, which she remembers so vividly. It's so strange she hasn't been able to smell anything since yesterday. While Tuhin was looking for an escape from the prison of his own mind in therapy, she blocked the traumatic memories and moved across the ocean to soften the edges of anguish. But in a way, she never veered that far. That's one of the things she has become aware of herself through this trip, that her career decisions were shaped by more than an academic interest. Through her work on technologies that guide mental health diagnoses, subconsciously she has always felt close to him. A calming sense of peace settles over Ella. She gets up and starts walking on the sand. Faint notes of Lalit, the Indian music of dawn, float from one of the beachside houses. Another scene from the previous night projects in front of her. Tuhin's eyes, a hair's breadth from hers, his lips grazing hers like they used to, back in Riverside Park in Chamonix. But they are not 15 anymore. Even the Earth can't return to its exact spot in the orbit at the end of each revolution. Still, she is grateful for the journey. Now she will always have the memory of the girl in Tuhin's painting. The knowledge that he paints her likeness even without realizing it will be a glowworm inside her chest. Perhaps the future can accommodate a steady state where she and Tuhin can forge a friendship without turbulence. Ella breaks into a fit of dry cough. She's getting tired, but she wants to soak up the promise of the morning. With every step, her mind awakes like the pores of freshly showered skin, open wide and eager for moisture and touch. For the first time, she feels unafraid of the ghosts of her past. The doubt that festered in the back of her mind for years about Tuhin's connection to Lily's death became more sinister than the truth itself. Tuhin has found his own complicated way of living with it. Lily's parents have put their lives back together in some manner of speaking, and even bonded with Tuhin over the loss. By alienating Josh or depriving herself of becoming a mother, she will not achieve any redemption. The image that forms in her mind now is not a memory, but a possibility. She and Josh walking with a toddler on the East Shore Trail by the San Francisco Bay. Her heart skips in a beat of anticipation. She craves for one jolt of endorphins. She breaks into a gentle jog on the firm sand, but almost immediately her pulse races and the chest seizes up. Her legs get in the way of each other and she stumbles and lies for a minute, clutching her chest. There is no one nearby. Even the yogis have left. Kochi is still fast asleep. That's it.
See, that was beautiful. And you read very well.
Thank you.
So, what did you have in mind when you wrote this novel?
So, I don't have a professional training as a writer, but I have always written poetry and I read a lot. But to me, the pandemic was also a kind of a perturbation in everybody's lives. And when the pandemic first set, I still remember it very distinctly. It was the middle of March. You know, we were supposed to visit parents back in India. And that was right when the shelter-in-place orders were put and India closed its borders to international travelers. And for the first time, I have been here in the US for 20 years now. You know, I've been, I'm settled here. But for the first time, I really feel that I was very far away from the rest of my family in India, and the border seemed really rigid. And that was kind of the starting point. I mentioned the mid-March because I remember it very distinctly. that I suddenly felt very isolated, and it moved me to, have some cathartic effect. And I started writing this novel, and it then had its own life, and it morphed into something else. But I think that was one of the things during the pandemic. And as it progressed, we saw all the grief that's unfolding, and then all the studies that came afterwards about long COVID and brain fog, and also the depression and how it has shaped people's lives, even the unborn, how they are now affected by it. So there was a lot of things happening, and I needed a channel to express it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thanks.
Terry Tierney is the author of a new novel, The Bridge on Beer River, from Unsolicited Press, published in July of 2023, and also the poetry collection The Poet's Garage, Unsolicited Press 2020, and the novel Lucky Ride, Unsolicited Press 2021. His poems and stories have recently appeared in the Bellevue Literary Review, the Remington Review, Rust and Moth, Typishly, Prose Online, Ghost Parachute, Flash Fiction Magazine, and other publications. His website is http://terrytierney.com. Please welcome Terry Tierney.
Thank you, Jan, and I really enjoyed hearing you all read. I've been spending a lot of time on public transportation and walking the streets in Oakland and San Francisco, and I find that those experiences and some of the observations have informed a lot of the poems I've been writing lately. So I wanted to share a few of those. This first poem is going to be in my collection that's coming out in October 2024. It's called Vacant Lot. Old man gathers wood, searches debris on bare ground, tents zipped and dark, rolled blankets, Trader Joe shopping cart, broken bike, garbage stuffed in plastic bags. They leave the sticks for me. Every night, more survivors, the press of each arrival, each birth, pulling my death closer. My body feels stretched and pegged, gray pelt drying on a rack, thin skin oozing blood like fog, mist hugging the ground. I remember when the lawn and trees before the diesel demolition left rotting beams and sheetrock piled on living soil, suffocating all, with lime and gypsum, the mound blocking sunlight, my place to sleep. Bones draped with loose skin, dried sprigs of oak and cedar, weak flame of morning fire, the night with cooling ashes. This poem is a little bit newer. It's called Open Wound. Pulling his sleeve to cover the soiled weave of scar and scab, he sits against the wire fence, the city strung to protect the hole they tore through sidewalk, digging down through planks of ships, coffins from a forgotten cemetery, layers of sand and concrete, deep enough to find traces of water, the ancient stream through the meadow, seeds now burned sterile by seeping oil, wildflowers trampled long ago, where fireflies will never find them. He leans until they tell him to leave, find his doctor elsewhere. But someone forgot to tell him the hole will never be filled. They only move it to another place, recklessly towed by trucks at night, spreading fumes that deaden the skin, draw life from the air. He imagines an injured bird, its plaintive trills trapped in his hand, and wraps its neck in gauze.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, those are so moving. Thank you, Terry. And I own 2 of Terry's books, and I highly recommend them. He's very prolific, so go check out his work.
What, do I have time for one more?
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry.
Okay. This is another newer poem. It's called Listen. On the platform, a man yells, God, God damn it, God, why won't you listen? God damn it, God. Two guards look behind me. One checks his cell phone. Their eyes are bored. The loudspeaker announces, the elevator is broken. Use the stairs. God, why aren't you listening? God damn it, God. The voice comes around a column, moving faster than me. I feel vulnerable, losing sight of the guards. Gray jacket rushes past, eyes scanning the floor and back up, hair bobbing between pleas, arms bent at the elbows, hands to his head and back down, as if shaking them dry. What can I say to him? But he's not looking at me, moves toward the tracks, pauses to stare down at bare dirt, cigarette butts, napkins. I'm talking to you, God. Listen to me, God. Turns and circles in front of the turnstiles, avoids a blanketed figure, clutching tin foil, strides toward the gasping ozone. I reach the steps as the loudspeaker drones. Antioch train arriving platform 2. God damn it, God, listen to me, God.
Thank you. Thank you for those fine poems, Carrie. I was wondering if you had any more thoughts on the panel theme of processing the pandemic.
Well, I believe the pandemic, the fact that we say the pandemic is over and there's still people suffering from long COVID, and we still have new strains coming up that are, that vulnerable people are susceptible to, is very much a concern. And I've been worried that the kind of collective sigh of relief that we've had for the end of the pandemic has taken our sights off other health issues and things like gun violence and the homelessness, addiction, other mental health problems, and just regular health problems, and the inability of people to find adequate medical care and affordable medical care. And so I just feel like the pandemic has exposed a lot more problems in our society, and the fact that we feel that it's all over has kind of drawn our attention away.
Yes,
so that's been what I've been concerned about.
Thank you. So now, Terry, would you be kind enough to introduce me if you have my bio there?
Certainly. Jan Steckel, she, her, left a pediatric practice caring for mostly Spanish-speaking children to be a writer, poet, and medical copy editor. She is Jewish, bisexual, and disabled by chronic pain. Her debut fiction collection, Ghosts in the Ocean, recently came out from Zeitgeist Press. Her poetry book, The Horizontal Poet, Zeitgeist Press 2011, won a 2012 Lambda Literary Award. Her poetry book, Like Flesh Covers Bone, Zeitgeist Press 2018, won 2 Rainbow Awards. Her fiction chapbook, Missing Tracks, Gertrude Press 2009, and her poetry chapbook, The Underwater Hospital, Zeitgeist Press 2006, also won awards. She lives in Oakland, California.
Thank you, Terry. So I'm going to read 3 poems, one from the first, one from the second, and one from the third year of the pandemic. So first year, American Plague. I'm ensconced in my 1926 paint-peeling, clapboard rotting Oaktown bungalow on the 9th day of George Floyd I Can't Breathe marches, 3 months into COVID-19 Bay Area lockdown. I ate the last Big Farm pain pill. Looters hit our CVS, so I'm texting photos to Green Rush Cannabis Delivery, driver's license, medical marijuana card, a postmarked envelope to myself, so they'll hand deliver me CBD balm. Those dudes are intrepid. Not rain, nor snow, nor sleet, nor tear gas. I could just buy shake with a handshake from the boys hanging out unmasked in front of the Korean liquor store all day. But I'm trying to preserve that fragile alveolar tissue. I don't want to aggravate my lungs because I'm high risk 4 different ways. I no longer venture out, just click, click, click my thumbs while humming We Shall Overcome to the rhythm of flashbangs and helicopter blades. Once I marched for Black Lives Matter. Now I'm a bug in a bell jar launching bucks through the ether at bail funds. My hair grows in wavy and gray. For exercise, I prune deadfall, clear long grass and blackberry vines from the backyard fence, waiting for fire season to spark, black smoke to roll. Oh Lord, when will we all be able to breathe? Second year. Winter clinic. If you haven't seen 40 kids in 4 hours on a clinic night in winter, peered in 80 ears, listened to 40 rapid hearts, felt 40 hot foreheads, if you haven't prescribed antibiotics, diaper rash cream, humidifiers, and inhalers, given the nod to warm yerba buena tea with honey, if you haven't talked and listened in Spanish while writing notes in the chart in English, and also listening to a tiny chest or gazing through a lens into a waxy ear, the drum red hot, if you haven't looked into the ears of the other 3 kids in the family, even though only one was registered for a 5-minute appointment, if you haven't talked a mother through it while you stuck a long needle into the spine of her 5-day-old infant and shown her the spinal fluid dripping out clear, told her how reassuring that was, kept her still with your voice while you tortured her baby, if you haven't coughed yourself through a flu season in a pediatrics department, if you haven't worked 36 hours straight while panting with pneumonia, if you haven't got chicken pox for the second time in your life at 36 years old, got pox in your throat and your vulva on the insides of your eyelids, so when you finally came back to work, you could only drink milkshakes, if you haven't watched a 6-month-old die that you've cared for since she popped out of her mother's womb months early, if you haven't cried as you slow walked her code, looked into her parents' eyes as they said, let her go, then I don't want to hear your opinion over who should keep working through a pandemic, or who deserves a vaccine, or who is making money, or what you think doctors want, or why they do what they do. Third year, the day of the Uvalde massacre. Coon Cat Tuesday. Sunny sweats on her stoop, says she's seen raccoons and cats mating in her backyard. They've bred a tribe of unholy hell beasts, coon cats who haunt the bushes. She also says we shouldn't call the cops if her ex violates the restraining order again. She doesn't know whose blood stains the street today. The woman get gunned down in front of Carlos's taco truck. Helicopters roar overhead. Caution tape and wagons cut off our exit from the block for hours as officers snap photos, pick up shell casings. People carry out chairs to sit and watch. The children are all wall-eyed and gabbling. Pistolas, policía, ambulancia. Everyone has COVID except those out dodging bullets. In Texas, someone shot up a school again, but that seems far away. Thank you.
That's so powerful.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have one question? Okay, then
go
ahead, Terry.
Who's going to ask you a question, Jan?
Sure. Well, I didn't write myself a question, so I think I'll just skip it unless, to allow time for group discussion unless anybody thinks of something or I think of something. Probably I might insert something tell us about your new book.
I can ask you a question.
Yeah.
I'm really interested, your poetry is very powerful.
Thank
and I'm
you.
really interested in how your medical background, informs your poetry, and also, whether you feel any kind of regret that you had to give up your career, because of your physical problem.
Sure.
And so I wanted to kind of get an idea. I thought it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on those two things and the transitions that you've made.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. I do miss my kids. I miss my patients and I miss their families. Not so much other doctors. I think like other disabled people, I don't like other doctors as much as I like the patients and families. But and I do regret that I couldn't do what I was trained to do. But at the same time, being disabled and being on Social Security disability insurance has allowed me to write, which is also important and which I also enjoy. So I feel like, the cliche, one door closes, another door opens. And I think a lot of us in this group have probably had that experience in our lives. So thank you for asking about that. And in terms of vocabulary and poetry, I try not to do too much jargon in the poetry. But it's true that when there's like a natural disaster or a war, as there is now, my way into it is often by imagining what's going on in the hospitals. So I have a poem coming out in a couple of days on a website called Topical Poetry that's about Gaza and hospitals, and I'll send you all a link for that later when it comes out. Thank you for asking. So I think we have time. I think we really only spent 40 minutes so far. So I think we have maybe 15 or 20 minutes for general questions. And I'd like to ask the first general question and call on each of you in turn for your thoughts. How has the pandemic changed your writing or performing life? Amaranthia?
Love that question. Wow. I would say in 2019, I was about to go to college. As I mentioned earlier, I couldn't go. I got into SCAD. I was supposed to do it virtually. But again, like with the fellowship, the virtual option was not viable. They wanted me to go pay for a room, even though I wasn't going. It didn't make any sense. So as a result, I lost the opportunity. I lost gallery opportunities because the pandemic came a couple months later. And then I just wasn't able to do these gallery works and like the mental health activism I wanted to do. And as a result, that's where my mom and I came together and we started doing these art shows, and we did the BLM one and other ones. And then eventually we led us to Art in Mind. And now we're just creating the space for virtual spaces for disabled people, for marginalized women, marginalized genders, and seeing them perform and seeing them tell their stories has really been encouraging for our works, or my artwork, my mom's writing. It's been very healing. And I feel like this is what I was always supposed to do. I never really felt comfortable in in-person spaces because of being multi-marginalized. It was very hard to see our stories in those spaces. So now we've kind of created our own. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah,
so.
and I urge everybody to go follow those links and look at what Amaranthia and Claire have created. It's marvelous.
Thank you so much.
Claire, how has the pandemic affected your writing and or performing life?
Oh my goodness. The pandemic has made me come into myself because, as I said before, I was self-sabotaging a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And having cancer right smack in the 2022.
Yeah.
Right? It began happening towards the end of 2021 and then emergency in March 2022. That is when I like to say I was born again. And I like to say I'm only 1 year old now. I'm 6 years old, but I'm 1 year old in this new life of seeing the world through eyes, not illusioned eyes,
right?
Not delusioned eyes.
Yeah.
I'm awake. I'm finally present in my life. And that's what the pandemic did for me. And because of that, and because of having cancer and being able to be in that hospital bed and being unable to move, I was able to bridge the gaps from past, present to future in a more healthy way. And my writing, I realized how important my writing to me and how much it is oxygen to me. And so that is what it stands for me. It's made me realize how writing is like oxygen to me.
Yes.
And that is how important it is to get ahead of my life before life gets ahead of you. And that's my call to action.
You're here.
So that's what's happened.
Thank you. Sue, how has the pandemic affected your writing or performing life? You need to unmute.
Sorry, I keep
No
forgetting. When we first started to feel this is a pandemic, I turned to what I feel comfortable doing. I moved to research. I'm an introvert. I moved to research. I read about the Spanish flu. I read about the first chronicle of flu by Hippocrates in many centuries ago. And what people chronicled in like a remote Spanish village about seeing a colorless world afterwards, and nobody knew if it was, a clinical symptom or something akin to depression that they were seeing. While I was reading all these things, a lot of things were unfolding in my line of work. I was seeing this increased demand for X-ray machines from China, and our service engineers working night and day in Italy to make the equipments work. And so I wanted to capture that time and everything that was unfolding. But as I was capturing the time, I felt I was listening more to myself, and there was a lull, and I could hear myself a lot more. And so while the novel continued, I started writing more poetry than I had ever done in the last few years. So in a way, it's kind of like journey to myself. Sorry, go ahead.
No, as it made you productive. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's lemons out of lemonade. Terry, how has the pandemic affected your life?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. Because I write both poetry and fiction, right? And of course, a novel is a really long-term project. It's you're kind of signing off for several years of work. When you write a novel. But I found that during the pandemic, similar to Sue, I think, and if I'm reading into that correctly, is that I kind of had short attention span syndrome or something. I just was not able to really concentrate on a large project, and so I found myself writing a lot of poetry, and, because it was something that I could do, and concentrate on in a day or two, and my attention span was such that I really just couldn't conceive of doing anything much longer. So, and it's interesting. I don't know if you felt that way too, Jan, but I several writers that I've talked about have had kind of similar experience that there's just so much going on that it was just so hard to really concentrate on anything for a very long period of time.
Yeah, I did feel like that. Part of the reason that I write poetry, or I've published a lot of poetry, even though I was trained in fiction, is that I have chronic pain, and for a while I was sort of over medicated for my chronic pain, and it was easier to write poetry because you can be a little dissociated or a little, out there and still write poems, and you don't have to concentrate as long. But when the pandemic came, I thought, gosh, is my career as a performance poet over? Because I can't go to spaces and perform in public because I'm very, very high risk. And so I basically had to just do Zoom. And Zoom, you don't get the same feedback that you do performing live. And it's harder to sell books on Zoom too, which reminds me, everybody check out everybody's links here. And if you're interested in somebody's work, please do check out their work and buy their books and support their work as artists, or their films, or, whatever. So I did write some poems. Sometimes I was struck dumb with horror from the pandemic or depression or something. But mostly what I did was I made a book of all my short stories that had been published over the last 40 years. And it just came out. It's called Ghosts and Oceans. And so I was able to, use that time productively and produce something, even though I wasn't producing as much new work as I usually do. So thank you for all your answers to that question. I also wanted to know from each of you, what do you think would be one advantage to society as a whole, and to AWP in particular, if they took more steps to include people who are now excluded from the public square by their vulnerability to COVID or other disabilities? Amaranthia?
I think from what my mom and I have observed from our In Mind show, this year is that we heard stories and voices of people that would never be seen or heard. I've never met so many disabled people in my life. I've never been in in such a big community of disabled people, because in New Hampshire, where we live, we've been here 15 years. I've just never really came across too many, or not many, disabled folks. And so hearing all those stories in a virtual space that was accessible, that had ASL, that had captioning, open and closed captioning, made me realize, like, imagine how much more people would understand or care or be able to at least be less ignorant about disabled people if we created things that were more accessible through virtual events and made them engaging and made them interesting and paid people as well for participating. So.
Claire, do you have any other ideas about what would change if society as a whole and AWP made things more accessible to people like us?
Well, for me, I finally realized that I am an immunocompromised disabled person. And so when I did art and mind before, I knew that I had invisible disabilities, but then now having a physical disability gave me the full spectrum of what it is to be disabled. So I feel, looking through this lens and seeing the world, how people both with invisible and disabled disabilities, physical and invisible disabilities look through the world. It would be great if the world can become more accessible for people like us, because if you allow this accessibility and this allow people like us to get into the world and do what we really do, I think that it would be amazing. Because the world is missing a lot by not creating spaces for people who are disabled.
I agree. Sue and Terry, you got 1 minute each to respond to that question. Sue?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sue.
Very good.
You go ahead, Terry.
Very good.
No, I just wanted to kind of agree and say that I think that society as a whole, really benefits from diverse voices and diverse ideas, and the more that we can be inclusive, it helps us all grow. It helps us all grow.
Agree with you.
Exactly.
Thank you. And Sue,
I agree. Same. I think, otherwise we miss out on the depth of experience, the spectrum of experience, all the powerful voices. So it's very important to be as inclusive as possible.
Well, I agree with everything, and I don't have anything to add, but Amaranthia was going to finish by reading a statement of our suggestions to AWP on this issue.
Yes, I love the statement so much. So it says, while we applaud the steps that AWP has taken to make its conference accessible to disabled, elderly, and chronically ill writers, we think there is much more to be done. This virtual conference in the first year of the pandemic proved that AWP can make all of its events accessible if non-disabled people wanted and needed that. We therefore reject the argument that this would be too difficult or expensive to do for others who continue to need it. All events should be streamed, not just a small subset. Most events should be hybrid, in person, and streamed. Events should be arranged in accessible venues that are not so far apart that people with mobility challenges have difficulty getting to them. All events should be captioned, an ASL interpreter should be made available when needed. Even less vulnerable people should be asked to mask indoors at the AWP conference during surges of respiratory illness. Standards of accessibility should be determined by disabled participants and organizers, not just non-disabled ones.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences, and thank you to the participants for listening to us. And also I wanted to thank Cristina Deptula, the publicity agent who helped us organize this panel. Cristina, we're very grateful to you too. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jen, for moderating.